My name is Mary Ann Cole. I'm 67 years old, widowed for nearly 3 years now, and until recently, I lived in the same house my late husband and I built brick by brick over 25 years ago. To the outside world, I'm just a quiet, gentle woman with a gentle laugh and a modest life. I keep my curtains ironed. I still write checks at the grocery store. I call people dear when I say goodbye. But what no one sees, what no one bothered to ask, is that I remember everything, and I feel more than I let on. The day I found out my only daughter was planning to erase me from my own home started like any other. I was cleaning up dinner. Just a reheated plate of meatloaf and mashed potatoes from 2 nights before. I was halfway through rinsing the dish when my phone rang. Lydia. Her name flashed on the caller ID, and God help me, I smiled. "Hey, Mom," she said with her usual breathless charm. "How are you holding up?" I told her I was fine, that I'd eaten, that I'd remembered to water the plants, that the neighbor had dropped off some soup. All lies. What I didn't say was that I'd barely touched my food, that I'd spent the last hour sitting in Sam's old recliner, just staring at the spot where his slippers used to be. "Oh, Mom," she sighed sweetly, "you know you can get groceries delivered now. I showed you that app, remember?" I remember. I also remember the way she spoke slower than usual when she explained it like she was talking to a child. I nodded along then, just like I did on the phone now. She said she was still in Scottsdale with Nathan, her husband. They were attending some conference on digital branding or sales funnels or something else I never pretended to understand. She was distracted. That's how I know she didn't realize the call hadn't ended when she dropped her phone into her purse. I should have hung up. But something held me back, and thank God I didn't. I heard rustling, muffled voices, then Lydia's voice. Clear as daylight, cutting like a blade. She forgot to turn the stove off again. She's going to burn the place down. It's time, Nathan. We need to put her somewhere safe. My ears started ringing. My grip on the phone tightened. She's becoming a burden. Those words, I didn't just hear them. I felt them, like a slow needle sliding under my skin. Then came Nathan's voice. Cool, strategic. The house is worth a fortune now. With Denver's market, we're talking $900,000 easy. We get her into assisted living, something simple, and finally buy that place in Sedona with the big kitchen. Lydia laughed. She actually laughed. She trusts us completely. She has no idea. That's when I dropped the phone. It hit the hardwood with a hollow thud, landing next to Sam's chair. I stood there, staring into the empty air like someone had smacked the breath out of me. They weren't just making plans. They were already living in the aftermath of my removal. They were already counting the money, dreaming up paint swatches for a kitchen that would be built from the bones of my life, all while I was still here, still alive, still pouring tea and folding the towels just the way Lydia liked. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I walked over to the fireplace where Sam's photo sat. He was smiling, like always. Wrinkles deepened from decades of work, laughter, and loving me. His eyes always made me feel safe. But not that night. That night, he looked like he was asking me why I hadn't seen this coming. We gave her everything, didn't we, Sam? We used our savings for her degree. We loaned her the down payment for her first apartment. We paid for her wedding, more than we could afford. I still remember that night, her twirling in her white dress as I wiped tears from my eyes and told her she was the most beautiful bride I'd ever seen. And now I was a burden. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat up, reading over old receipts in a box Sam had labeled, just in case. $49,000 for her college, $3,000 for her car repairs, $210 for the steak dinner last month, her and Nathan's anniversary, which I paid for. Funny how generosity is silent when it's given, but so loud when it's taken for granted. She thought I wouldn't notice. She thought I'd be too old, too slow, too soft. But I remembered something my husband once said on the day we closed on our home. A woman who builds her life with her own hands doesn't let anyone tear it down without a fight. He was talking about me. The next morning, I dressed in my best cardigan, the one with the stitched lavender flowers, and walked into town. And just like that, I started disappearing from their future. Quietly, calmly, ruthlessly. I didn't know how it would all play out yet, but I knew this. I'd make sure the next time Lydia called me a burden, she'd be doing it from the sidewalk outside a house she no longer had the keys to. The first thing I did was stop answering Lydia's calls. Not immediately. That would have raised suspicion. But I let her voicemails pile up just enough to send a message. I'm here. I'm listening. But I'm not at your disposal anymore. She didn't call every day, of course. That was just what she told herself. Told Nathan, told her friends, that she checked in with Mom all the time. The truth was, we spoke twice a week, if that. Still, my silence made her nervous. Good. It bought me time. That Wednesday morning, I brewed a stronger cup of coffee than usual. I added a touch of cream, no sugar, and sat at the oak dining table Sam had built the summer Lydia turned 12. I pulled out a notepad, lined, blue ink, the kind I used to keep grocery lists on, back when people still wrote things by hand, and I made a new kind of list. Step 1, reclaim the house. Step 2, close the exit they think I'll take. Step 3, make them believe I'm crumbling. Step 4, sell the house before they even ask. Step 5, leave the ashes and a letter. That last one, I underlined it twice. I spent that entire day in my robe and slippers. Not because I was tired, but because it made me look tired. Lydia had installed one of those smart cameras in the living room under the excuse of keeping you safe, Mom. I knew how to unplug it without tripping the alert, but I didn't. Not yet. Let her watch. Let her see the woman she was trying to erase shuffle around in silence with a haunted look in her eyes. I was building a performance. I even turned the thermostat up to 80 and wrapped myself in a blanket just so I'd appear more frail. But when night fell, I was anything but. That evening, I dug out a metal lockbox from behind the fireplace wall. Sam's old hiding place. Inside was every deed, bill, bank statement, and notarized letter that proved something Lydia hadn't considered. The house? It wasn't in her name, not even partially. Sam and I had redrafted the will after his second heart attack, deciding that the house would never pass to Lydia without a written transfer. And after seeing the way she treated him during his final days, rushing through visits, sighing when he forgot words, whispering to Nathan about nursing homes, I made sure we filed a revocable living trust. The house was mine, and only mine. Even if I died, she wouldn't get a cent unless I explicitly gave it. She had no idea. She thought being my daughter gave her automatic access. But I didn't raise her to be entitled. That sense of ownership, of thinking she deserved my home, my money, my peace, was something she taught herself. I called an attorney the next morning. His name was Mark Bishop. A kind man, mid-40s, always smelled faintly of aftershave and printer toner. He'd handled Sam's estate and liked to remind me that I was sharper than most of his corporate clients. "You really want to do this, Mrs. Cole?" he asked. "I don't want to," I said, "but I need to." He reviewed the papers, nodded, and helped me draft a simple plan. Sell the house within 60 days. Wire the funds to a private account Lydia didn't know existed. Sign a rental lease in a place she'd never think to look. And disappear. Disappear on my own terms. Before I left his office, I paused at the door. Make sure no mail gets forwarded. No phone calls redirected. He smiled. You want to vanish without a trace. Not vanish, I said softly. I want to be exactly where I choose to be, and nowhere they can claim. By week's end, the for sale by owner sign was discreetly up, but only visible from the alley behind the house. My neighbor Terry, a Vietnam vet with a bad hip and a soft spot for secrets, agreed to field calls. I didn't list it publicly. I didn't want Lydia's digital alerts tipping her off. I had buyers within days. Apparently our house, the house she wanted to flip, was now the hottest quiet listing in the neighborhood. And the best part? She still thought I was baking banana bread and watching daytime TV. Let her think that. Let her believe she was winning. Because when the door finally slammed shut behind me, she wouldn't even know it was her last chance to knock. I didn't always plan to disappear from my daughter's life. In fact, if you told me even a year ago that I'd one day be orchestrating my own exit like a quiet storm, I would have laughed, then offered you tea and a slice of lemon cake. Because mothers don't just vanish. We stay, we hold, we sacrifice. But there comes a day when silence is no longer love, it's consent. And Lydia had mistaken mine for surrender. She'd always been impatient with me. Even as a little girl, she'd roll her eyes when I repeated myself or told the same story twice. She wanted answers fast, results faster, and for everyone else to move on her time. I used to think it was just her being ambitious, but now I saw it for what it was. Control. Control masked as competence, assertiveness as affection. And me? I was just the fixture she rearranged to make room for her real life. After Sam passed, I held on to Lydia like a raft in the ocean. She was my only child, my reason to get out of bed. I'd send her good morning texts, make excuses to drop off homemade meals, knit scarves she never wore. She accepted them with smiles, empty, obligatory ones. Nathan tolerated me, but only because I stayed out of the way. They'd come by on holidays, sure, but always with one foot out the door. Lydia would scroll through her phone while I stirred gravy. Nathan would take work calls during dessert. And every time they left, I'd stand at the window like a statue, watching their taillights vanish down the block. Still, I convinced myself they loved me. Because what mother wants to believe she's disposable? But now, with the truth echoing in my chest like a cracked bell, I couldn't deny it anymore. They weren't visiting out of love. They were checking inventory. And I wasn't family. I was property. Every night I sat in my bedroom and went through the little pieces of proof I'd collected over the years, but ignored. The way Lydia asked for access to my accounts after Sam died, saying, "It's just easier for me to handle your bills online." The way Nathan accidentally took my signed checkbook home after our 4th of July barbecue. The time they brought brochures for assisted living homes just in case I needed one, even though I was still gardening and climbing ladders like a woman half my age. I'd let it all slide because love makes fools of us, especially mothers, but not anymore. Mark called that Friday with news. "You have an offer," he said, "all cash, above asking." My breath caught. Already? They don't want an inspection. They just want it fast. Perfect. Terry handled the walkthrough. I stayed out of sight, watching from the kitchen window as a young couple in their 30s wandered through my living room. They pointed at the fireplace, the big bay window, the pantry Sam built from scratch, and I felt it, a pang, not of regret, of grief, because that house had held my whole life, my dreams, my grief, my daughter's laughter, my husband's voice calling, "Honey, come see this sunset." And now I was letting it go. But grief is better than being robbed. At least grief is honest. That night, Lydia finally noticed my silence. I woke to 3 missed calls and a text. "Everything okay, Mom? Haven't heard from you in a few days." I stared at the screen for a long time. I almost replied out of habit, but then I remembered her voice. She won't fight us. She trusts us. I turned the phone face down and whispered, "Not anymore." Instead, I started writing. A letter. To her. Not a spiteful one. Not a tantrum. Just the truth. I told her about the conversation I overheard, word for word. I told her about the lockbox, about the trust, about how the house had been mine and would never be hers, not by assumption, not by blood, and certainly not by betrayal. I told her I still loved her, but I no longer trusted her. I told her that love doesn't entitle someone to someone else's life, and I ended it with the most honest sentence I've ever written. You didn't lose me because I was weak. You lost me because I finally remembered I wasn't. I folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and placed it in the drawer beside the front door. She would find it eventually, not when I was gone, but when the walls started whispering the truth. The papers were signed on a Tuesday, no ceremony, no crowd, just me, a notary, and Mark. I wore my powder blue cardigan, the one Lydia always said made me look soft. I smiled through the entire meeting, nodding politely as if I were agreeing to new curtain rods or a book club invite, not severing my daughter's hold on my life. When it was done, Mark slid the documents toward me. "It's officially closed. The money will hit your private account within 24 hours. I nodded. "Good. Are you sure you don't want me to let your daughter know?" I looked up at him slowly. That's not part of the story she's telling herself right now. He blinked, confused. "She thinks she's in control," I continued. "Let her keep thinking it, until it's too late to rewrite the ending." Mark leaned back in his chair, then smiled. "You remind me of my mother." I smiled too, but it didn't reach my eyes. I had too much planning left to do, because the next part had to be perfect. I didn't just want to sell the house. I wanted her to feel the absence like a bruise she couldn't cover up. I went home that night and stood in the center of the living room, barefoot, listening to the quiet. Sam's chair, the wedding photo, Lydia's framed drawing from 2nd grade, my teacups, still stacked just the way I liked them, delicate, white, and floral-rimmed. I gave myself one last night to grieve, to cry if I needed, to feel the echo of everything I'd been and everything I was about to leave behind, but I didn't cry. Instead, I packed, not everything, just what mattered. A small cedar chest of old letters from Sam, a worn quilt from my mother's hands, one photo of Lydia, the one where she was still 8 years old, still innocent, still someone who ran to me for safety instead of away from me in embarrassment. The rest. I left. I didn't want to take the memories with me. I wanted her to walk into the house and feel them missing. I arranged the movers for the next morning, paid in cash, no forwarding address, no goodbye. I rented a small furnished apartment on the edge of Boulder, quiet, cozy, untraceable. The landlord was a woman my age named Clara, who'd once burned all her ex-husband's shoes in a fire pit. We bonded quickly. I told her I was disappearing from people who expected too much and gave too little. She nodded once and handed me the keys. The first night in that new space, I slept better than I had in years. No cameras, no calls, no pretending to be the version of myself Lydia could tolerate. I was just Mary Ann, a woman with her own name, her own story, and now her own peace. I kept my old phone but shut off location sharing, turned off notifications. No more Mom popping up on Lydia's screen. If she wanted to find me, she'd have to do something she hadn't done in years. Actually look. 2 days later, I got the email. From Lydia. The subject line read, "Mom, why is there a sold sign in front of the house?" I opened it slowly, savoring the panic bleeding through the pixels. Did something happen? Are you okay? I just drove by to drop off some flowers. Thought you might like that since you weren't answering your phone. And the house is gone. Gone, Mom. Who did you sell it to? When? Why didn't you tell me? No greeting, no warmth, just pure shock. I could picture her standing on the curb in her expensive heels, arms crossed, jaw clenched, trying not to make a scene. I didn't reply. Instead, I waited. The next day, another message. I called the county office and they said it's been transferred under a trust name. Did you do this behind my back? Behind her back? Funny. That's what betrayal feels like, Lydia. I still didn't respond. 3 voicemails came next, increasingly frantic. Mom, call me. Mom, please. What's going on? And then, you don't get to do this. I'm your daughter. I have a right to know what's happening. That one made me laugh out loud. A right? The same daughter who called me a burden? The same woman who priced out my life while I was still alive to overhear it? No, you don't get rights to people you've already written off. You get silence. My silence. That weekend, Lydia finally went to the house, or what was left of it, because the new owners had already started renovations, gutted the living room, painted over the floral wallpaper, ripped out the pantry Sam built with his bare hands. She texted me a photo of the hallway where her framed childhood drawing once hung, now replaced by nothing. What did you do? I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because silence is the only sound loud enough to be heard by someone who never listened when you spoke. And in that silence, I could already feel the cracks forming in her world. 3 weeks had passed since the house was sold. Lydia had gone from confused to frantic to furious. She had called every neighbor. She'd stopped by the library, even asked the mailman if I'd said anything. But I hadn't. I'd made sure of it. I didn't disappear to be chased. I disappeared to be free. Still, I knew she'd eventually do what I'd planned all along, go back to the house, try to get in, and find the only thing I'd left behind, the letter. It sat on the mantel above the fireplace, alone, unsealed, with her name written in my hand. No stamp, no envelope, just Lydia. I knew she'd go there, like a burglar returning to the scene of a crime, desperate to retrieve what she thought she left behind. The new owners agreed to let her in once, for sentimental closure. I made arrangements before the sale, told them to expect her, told them to let her in, but only once. When she finally walked into the house that Saturday morning, I imagine the air felt different. The paint was fresh, the windows no longer dusty, no scent of cinnamon tea or lemon polish lingering in the walls. Just the raw, echoing emptiness of a space she thought she would inherit, now permanently out of reach. And then she saw it. The letter. She must have hesitated. Maybe she expected a scolding, a cry for reconciliation. One last desperate plea from a mother too fragile to walk away completely. But what she got was the truth. Lydia, I heard everything. That night, your call. The words you thought I was too old, too naive, too loving to catch. She's becoming a burden. I wonder if you heard yourself when you said it. I gave you life. My body broke so you could be born. I gave you years, nights of no sleep, days of scraped knees and handmade Halloween costumes. I gave you my hands, my mind, my laughter, my savings. Your father and I gave you a foundation we never had ourselves. We gave it without question, without limit. And what you gave back was calculation. You thought you could take everything I had while I was still breathing. You called me weak in your tone, if not your words. But you forgot the most important thing. I was watching. You never asked if I wanted to leave this house. You never asked what memories it held, what corners still whispered your father's voice to me in the quiet. You never saw me as a woman with a story, only as a signature to collect. So I made the choice for both of us. I sold it. I left. And I did it without asking, just like you planned to do with me. You called me a burden. Now you carry the weight of that word forever. I still love you, but I do not trust you. And I will not return to a daughter who sees me as a transaction. I hope someday you understand this wasn't revenge. This was self-respect. Mom, I don't know how long she stood there reading it. I don't know if she cried. But I do know this. She hasn't called since. Not one voicemail, not one frantic email, nothing. The silence I once feared has become a kind of sanctuary. No more manipulation disguised as care. No more sugar-laced guilt. Just me. I walk every morning now, early before the streetlights fade. I sip coffee with Clara on her porch and talk about books, not betrayals. I volunteer at the local church thrift shop and laugh with strangers who don't expect anything from me but kindness. I even joined a painting class. Last week, the instructor said my brushstrokes were full of grief, but also grace. She doesn't know the story. She doesn't need to. Because I didn't vanish. I reclaimed my story. And when I think of Lydia now, I don't picture her with anger. I picture her standing in that empty house, the past stripped from the walls, holding a letter written in ink and finality. Maybe one day she'll change. Maybe not. But I won't be waiting, because the most powerful kind of leaving is the one where you don't slam the door. You just lock it quietly behind you and never look back. 6 months passed. 6 entire months since I'd left the house, since I watched my daughter's name appear on my phone and chose silence, since I gave her no choice but to live in the echo of her own words. She's becoming a burden. You'd think the story ended there. It didn't. Because when you pull yourself out of someone's narrative, they eventually notice the hole you left behind. And sometimes they try to rewrite the ending in their favor, even if the story no longer belongs to them. It started with a whisper in the church basement. I was helping sort donated books for the literacy fundraiser when Clara leaned over the table, eyes wide. "You won't believe who just registered for the board's marketing committee," she said. I laughed. "Please don't tell me it's Pastor Daniels again. He tried to turn the newsletter into a sports column last time." Clara leaned in, voice low. "Your daughter." I froze. "Lydia?" She nodded. My heart didn't leap. It braced. "She's volunteering?" I asked slowly. Clara pursed her lips. "She's not just volunteering. She's trying to become the head of the committee." That alone wouldn't have bothered me. Lydia had always been charismatic, organized, a natural speaker. But the board Lydia was trying to join wasn't just about charity. It was connected to the local grant program that funded housing assistance. And guess who helped establish it last winter? Me. Quietly. Anonymously. I had invested a portion of the proceeds from the house into the initiative. I wanted to help widows and retirees, women like me, who were being pushed out of their homes by rising costs and greedy relatives. I didn't want credit, but I certainly didn't want Lydia rewriting the narrative to make herself look like the savior of women she'd once plotted to displace. "I need to attend the next meeting," I said to Clara. Her eyes sparkled. "Do you want to confront her?" I shook my head. "No. I want her to see who she overlooked." The following Thursday, I dressed carefully. Not to impress, but to remind. A navy blue blouse, simple pearl earrings, a shawl Sam once bought me on our anniversary trip to Santa Fe. The kind of elegance that whispers instead of shouts. I walked into the meeting quietly, unnoticed at first. It was held in a large room at the community center, round tables pushed together in a wide oval. Lydia stood at the front, back straight, that familiar, confident smile etched across her face. She was already speaking. "And I believe I bring unique insight into the struggles of elderly residents. I've watched my own mother battle isolation and limited support." My jaw tensed. Battle? She made it sound like she visited me in a hospital, like she'd been the one running upstairs with grocery bags, not scheming to sell my home while I was still living in it. I sat in the last chair at the far end of the table, just as she finished her pitch. She didn't notice me. Not yet. The committee chair, Mr. Ellison, thanked her and turned to the table. "Does anyone have any comments or questions before we move forward?" I raised my hand, slowly, deliberately. Lydia turned, half distracted, half disinterested, and then she saw me. It hit her like a slap. Her smile faltered. Her lips parted slightly. One hand instinctively brushed her hair behind her ear, something she always did when caught off guard. "Mrs. Cole," Mr. Ellison nodded warmly, "we're honored to have you back. You were a founding donor of this committee's pilot." All eyes turned to me, including hers. I folded my hands on the table. "I have one question." Lydia swallowed. "Yes?" she asked, too quickly. I tilted my head. "What exactly qualifies you to speak on the needs of vulnerable seniors?" The room went quiet. Lydia's face flushed. She tried to recover. "As I mentioned, I've had first-hand exposure through family—" "Yes," I interrupted gently. "Through your mother, if I heard correctly." Her eyes flickered. Someone in the room murmured, "Isn't that her?" I leaned forward slightly. "And tell us, did your mother ask for your help, or did you assume she needed saving?" Lydia didn't speak. She didn't have to. The weight of her silence was enough. I smiled, not out of spite, but because the truth didn't need to be shouted. It just needed to be seen. And now it was. You could have heard a pin drop in that room. The silence didn't feel awkward. It felt seismic, like something old and heavy had finally cracked. Lydia stood frozen at the front of the committee circle, blinking rapidly. Her eyes moved from face to face, searching for someone, anyone, to save her. But there were no lifeboats. She had strutted into this meeting expecting applause. Instead, she was met with her own echo. She began, trying to recover. "I didn't mean it the way it sounded." Someone cleared their throat. It was Mrs. Denton, a retired teacher and long-standing committee member who rarely spoke unless something deeply offended her. "So, you didn't mean to say your mother was battling isolation while you were preparing to sell her home?" Lydia's jaw tensed. "That's not exactly how it happened." I stayed silent. I didn't need to say another word. The letter, the silence, the sale, those were already louder than anything I could say now. Mr. Ellison, ever the moderator, leaned forward and adjusted his glasses. "Ms. Cole," he said gently, "this committee takes authenticity very seriously, especially when our work impacts the dignity and protection of elders." Lydia looked like she wanted to crawl out of her skin. "I wasn't trying to manipulate anyone," she blurted. "I was just worried about my mother. I thought she needed help and—" "And so you plan to move her out of her home without her consent?" Mrs. Denton asked, her voice icy. "That doesn't sound like help. That sounds like convenience." Lydia looked at me now. Not with anger, not even guilt, just desperation. "Mom, please," she said, voice trembling. "You know I love you." I looked at her long and hard. "You love what I gave you," I said softly. "But the second I stopped giving, you tried to take." Her face collapsed in on itself like wet paper. A few members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding her eyes. The room wasn't cruel, it was just honest now, and honesty has a way of making liars feel very, very small. "I think we've heard enough," Mr. Ellison said, clearing his throat. "We'll take a vote next week after reviewing applicant statements. Thank you, Ms. Cole." Lydia stood there a moment too long, like she didn't understand she'd already been dismissed. Then she gathered her bag, nodded stiffly, and turned to leave. But just before she reached the door, she paused and looked back at me. "Is this what you wanted?" she whispered, her voice too soft for the others to hear. I stood up. "No," I said, "but it's what I needed." She walked out without another word. The door clicked shut behind her. It didn't slam. It didn't have to. Because for the first time in a long time, Lydia had walked into a room where she wasn't in control, where no performance, no curated smile, no second-hand story could protect her, where the truth stood taller than her pride. And I didn't do it to humiliate her. I did it so she'd finally see the woman she had tried to erase wasn't just alive, but standing. And this time, standing alone. The day after the committee meeting, I woke up to blue sky and birdsong. You'd think I would have been replaying Lydia's face in my mind, the shock, the faltering voice, the plea in her eyes. But I wasn't. I was thinking about the lemon tree Clara had given me. It sat by the kitchen window in my new apartment, small and crooked, but already pushing out tiny, stubborn buds. She'd found it in a discount nursery bin, half dead, and said it reminded her of me. "You're tougher than you look," she'd said, "but you need the right light." That morning, I watered it slowly, then opened the window to let in the breeze. For the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like a mother. I didn't feel like a widow. I didn't feel like a woman halfway erased from her own life. I felt like someone beginning again. Later that day, Clara and I met with the local housing initiative team. The funds I had put into the foundation, my quiet investment from the house sale, had grown faster than we expected. We were now offering 3 full housing scholarships to single elderly women displaced by family pressure or financial hardship. One of the new applicants reminded me of myself. Her name was Janice, 65, divorced. Her children had petitioned to take control of her estate after she was diagnosed with mild memory loss. They'd moved her into a tiny studio with no windows and told her it was temporary. She'd been living there for 2 years. When we handed her the new keys, she broke down crying, said it was the first time she'd been asked what she wanted since her diagnosis. That night, I sat on my porch with Clara, sipping tea as the sun sank behind the mountains. "You don't seem shaken," she said, "about your daughter." I looked down at my teacup. The steam curled gently in the wind. "I think, for a long time, I confused forgiveness with forgetting," I said. "I thought if I stayed quiet, if I kept showing up, maybe she'd remember the version of me that mattered, the real one." Clara nodded. "And now?" "Now I realize I don't need to be remembered by her to exist. Because I had built something new, and not just for others, for me. People often talk about legacy like it's a name etched into marble, or a fund named after you, or children who say your name with reverence. But legacy is also this: a stranger holding new house keys with trembling hands, a lemon tree blooming in unfamiliar light, a woman who once begged for love, finally choosing peace. I didn't burn bridges with Lydia. I just stopped walking across the ones she'd booby-trapped. And maybe, just maybe, one day she'll stand on the other side and call out, not with guilt, not with entitlement, but with humility. Maybe. But I'm not waiting, because I finally learned that letting go doesn't mean losing. It means surviving. And surviving in peace? That's the sharpest, sweetest kind of victory. The first voicemail came 3 weeks after the committee meeting. Her voice was different. Gone was the sharp tone. Gone was the fake cheer, the subtle edge of control. Instead, she sounded small, tentative. "Hi, Mom, I guess you're not picking up. That's okay, I wanted to check on you. I know things got kind of out of hand." Out of hand. That's how she phrased it. Like she'd spilled something on the rug. I didn't delete the message. I didn't respond either. I just let it sit there, blinking in my inbox like a quiet witness. 2 days later came another. "I didn't know you were so involved with the housing board. I'm impressed. Really, I guess I should have asked more." And then, "You've always been stronger than I gave you credit for." That one stung, because it was the closest she'd ever come to admitting the truth, that she had underestimated me, not just recently, but for years. She had shrunk me in her mind to fit the version of the world where she was the adult, and I was the old woman who needed managing. But I wasn't her project, and I certainly wasn't her property. The fourth voicemail came at 2:11 a.m. I didn't hear it until morning, but the timestamp told me everything. It was the first time her voice cracked. "Mom, I keep driving past the house. I don't even know why. It's not ours anymore, not mine, not yours. But I can't stop." She paused. "They painted over the yellow door. I always hated that yellow door. I told you it was too bright, too cheerful. But now I miss it." Her breathing hitched. "I thought I was helping you, but maybe I was just helping myself." Then a whisper, "I don't know how to undo this." That message stayed with me the longest, not because it begged for forgiveness, but because it finally admitted guilt, real guilt, not polished, not presented, just raw. But here's what guilt doesn't do. It doesn't erase harm. It doesn't rebuild trust. It doesn't rewrite history. It only opens the door to humility. And whether or not someone walks through that door, that's on them. I didn't call back, not because I wanted to punish her, but because I wasn't ready to invite her back into a life she tried to steal. Instead, I kept building the new life I had chosen. I joined a memoir writing class at the library, started walking with a group of older women every Saturday morning. I baked muffins for the senior center and found myself laughing more than I had in years. And yet, every few nights I'd find myself listening to her messages again, not for comfort, not even for closure, just to remember that sometimes silence does more than words ever could. Because when the person who silenced you for years suddenly hears nothing back, it's deafening. Lydia didn't give up after the voicemails. She pivoted. That's how she'd always been, adaptable, relentless, like water looking for a crack in the stone. And she thought perhaps that if her apologies didn't open the door, then nostalgia might. I started receiving packages, small ones at first. The first was a blue scarf, light wool, hand-woven. I recognized the stitching pattern. It was one of the ones I used to make when she was a teenager, back when she'd actually asked me to teach her. There was no note, just the scarf, folded neatly in a plain box. The second was a framed photo of the three of us, Lydia, Sam, and me on her wedding day. We were laughing, wind in our hair, standing on the edge of some Colorado cliff she'd insisted on for her ceremony. I hadn't seen that photo in years. I didn't even know she had a copy. The third was a handwritten letter, not typed, not rehearsed, just ink and anxiety on cream-colored stationery. "Mom, I know you're probably not reading this. Or maybe you are, and you just don't believe me anymore. I wouldn't blame you. I thought if I could just keep everything controlled, tidy, manageable, I could avoid losing you like we lost Dad. I didn't know I was hurting you. But now I see it. I treated you like a checklist, not a person. And I'm sorry. I don't expect anything from you. I just want you to know, I remember everything you gave. I remember all of it now. Love, Lydia. It wasn't flowery, it wasn't perfect, but it was something. And still, I didn't write back. Not out of cruelty, but because my healing wasn't on her timeline anymore. I wasn't punishing her, I was protecting myself. People assume forgiveness is a door you swing open the second someone knocks, but real forgiveness, it's a door you unlock from the inside when you feel safe enough to face what's on the other side. And I wasn't there yet. Clara noticed the shift in me. "You okay?" she asked one morning, watching me unwrap the photo frame Lydia had sent. I nodded slowly. "I don't know what to feel." "You don't have to feel one thing," she said, matter of fact. "Love and hurt live in the same house more often than we think." She was right. I still loved Lydia. That love didn't evaporate just because I'd seen her darkest self, but the trust, the safety, that had been shattered. And love without trust is like living in a house with no roof. You can stay for a while, maybe even survive, but you're always waiting for the next storm to soak you. That week, I received an invitation, not in the mail, not in a package, but through Clara. "She called the community board," she said quietly. "Asked if you'd be willing to meet her. Public place, just a conversation." I raised an eyebrow. "And what did you say?" "I told her I'd ask, but that you don't owe her anything, not even a reply." I stared out the window for a long time that afternoon. The sun was beginning to fall behind the hills, stretching long shadows across the pavement. A little girl walked by holding her grandmother's hand, swinging their arms in sync. I used to do that with Lydia once, and I wondered, what would I have said to that little girl if she told me, "One day I'll grow up and try to sell your house out from under you"? What would I have said? Maybe nothing. Maybe just held her hand tighter. Because that's the tragedy of motherhood. We hold them with both hands, never imagining they'll grow strong enough to push us away. And sometimes they don't mean to. Sometimes they do. I agreed to meet her. Not because I missed her, not because the letters and the packages softened me, but because curiosity is a powerful whisper, and somewhere in my bones, I needed to know if she'd come to truly listen, or if this was just another performance. We met in a cafe tucked behind the art museum, a quiet place with warm lighting and slow jazz humming under the clink of silverware. I arrived first, chose a table in the corner, facing the door. I wanted to see her before she saw me. When she entered, I almost didn't recognize her, not because she looked different, but because her confidence had slipped. Her shoulders weren't pulled back like they used to be. Her eyes darted around the room, landing on me like she wasn't sure she'd earned the right. She walked toward the table with slow, cautious steps. "Hi, Mom," she said softly, sliding into the seat across from me. I nodded. "Lydia." There was a pause. Not tense, not heavy, just real. The kind that follows the first honest breath after a long lie. "I didn't think you'd say yes," she admitted. "I didn't think you'd ask." She gave a dry, nervous laugh. "Touché." We didn't speak for a while. The waiter came and went. I ordered tea. She didn't order anything. I noticed her hands trembling under the table. "I want to say something," she said finally, "but I don't want to say it wrong." I looked at her directly. "Then don't rehearse it. Just say it." She inhaled deeply. I was wrong. The words landed on the table between us like an offering, not a defense, not an excuse, just a truth. "I know I can't undo what I said, or what I did," she continued, her voice low. "I didn't realize how much I'd turned you into an obligation. I was so wrapped up in my version of control that I didn't see the human being right in front of me." I said nothing, because what was there to say? She had taken years of soft guidance, sacrificial love, and motherly presence and reduced them to a liability. She blinked quickly. I saw her fighting tears. I thought that if I kept you close, but also contained, then I could manage the grief of maybe losing you. But all I did was hurt you in the process. You didn't want a mother, I said gently. You wanted a manageable version of me. She nodded slowly. I did. There was something tragic about hearing her say it. Not because it was shocking, but because it was finally real, finally acknowledged. I don't expect you to come back, she said. I don't expect things to go back to what they were. I just want you to know, I see it now. I stirred my tea. The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was sacred. Because some things, even in forgiveness, don't get fixed. They just stop bleeding. Thank you, I said finally. Her eyebrows lifted. I mean it, I continued. For saying it. For not pretending. She leaned forward. Would you ever consider letting me be part of your life again, slowly, on your terms? It was the most respectful thing she'd said in years. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. But I smiled. And that was enough, for now. Because forgiveness is not a switch. It's a gate. And just maybe, in that moment, I let her step one foot inside. Not because she deserved it, but because I did. Because I deserved to choose. Because I had learned that the quietest kind of power is having the strength to leave, the wisdom to heal, and the freedom to return only if you want to. Not because you're needed, not because you're expected, but because you are whole. 6 months after that cafe meeting, I found myself back at the community center, but not for Lydia. This time, I was there to teach. The Housing Foundation had started a new program, Second Chapters, a weekly workshop where older women could share their stories, document their lives, and help each other rewrite their worth in a world that too often forgets them. I stood in front of a small circle of folding chairs, notebook in hand, watching as 7 women filtered in. Some walked with canes. One rolled in with a walker wrapped in ribbons. Another had a notepad so worn its edges curled like petals. Welcome, I said softly, smiling as they settled. You're not here to become someone new. You're here to remember who you were before someone told you to shrink. That became the heartbeat of the group. We laughed. We cried. We stitched together decades of motherhood, betrayal, independence, survival. It wasn't therapy. It was truth spoken aloud in a room full of ears that had been waiting for the same release. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a forgotten chapter. I felt like a voice. One day after class, I stayed back to tidy the room. As I picked up the last loose sheet of paper from the floor, I heard a familiar voice behind me. Still changing lives, huh? I turned. Lydia stood in the doorway, hands clasped in front of her, a little shy, a little hopeful. I'm not sure about that, I said. Mostly, I'm just listening. She nodded. That's more than I did for a long time. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She walked inside slowly and sat in the chair closest to mine. I didn't come here to ask anything, she said. I just wanted to sit where you sit. Maybe understand a little better. I watched her for a while. She looked older than I remembered, not in years, but in humility. There was a tiredness around her eyes that I hadn't seen before. Not exhaustion, but surrender. And somehow, that made her more human to me than ever. We didn't talk for long, but when she stood to leave, she paused by the door. I know I might never earn the version of you I once had, she said, but I'd like to be worthy of whatever's left. And then she was gone. No tears, no grand apology, just a quiet acknowledgement of the woman I'd become without her. And that, more than anything, felt like closure. Because Lydia finally understood something I had to burn my past to learn. You don't get to rewrite someone's story just because you were part of the beginning. I used to believe that motherhood was a destination, a fixed place you arrived at when you gave birth, something permanent, unshakable, like a title etched in stone. But now, as I sat in my little sunroom, sipping chamomile and watching the shadows stretch long across the wooden floor, I realized something much more honest. Motherhood isn't a destination. It's a river. It moves, it bends, it changes course, and sometimes it runs dry. Lydia still reached out from time to time, a text here, a card on my birthday, a photo of a meal she cooked that she swore she learned from me, and I responded when I felt ready, not out of duty, but choice. That was the difference now. Everything was a choice. One spring morning, I walked past a mirror in my hallway and stopped, not because of how I looked, but because of what I saw. For the first time in years, I saw the full woman standing there. Not just Lydia's mother, not just Sam's widow, not just the woman who used to knit scarves and bake pies and host Christmas. I saw Mary Ann, resilient, soft-spoken but steel-spined, a woman who sold her house not to escape, but to rebuild, a woman who left behind betrayal and found herself. I ran my fingers through my short silver hair, smiling slightly at the reflection. There were still cracks in the glass, still scars I didn't speak of, still pieces I hadn't quite put back together, but I was whole in all the ways that mattered. That afternoon, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten, neatly folded, no return address, but I knew the handwriting by heart. It was from Lydia. Dear Mom, I spoke at a conference last week about elder dignity. I didn't mention your name, but I told your story. The real one, not the one I used to tell. The version where you stopped being a burden and became the bravest woman I've ever known. One of the attendees came up afterward and said, I wish I'd had a mother like that. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what she meant. Thank you for letting me see the woman you are, even if I had to lose you first to notice. Love always, Lydia. I placed the letter in a small wooden box on my nightstand, the same one where I kept Sam's last note, a few baby photos, and a pressed rose from my wedding bouquet. I didn't cry. I didn't ache. I simply exhaled. Because Lydia had finally met the version of me she never got to know, the version I had to fight to become. And whether she stood beside me again or simply watched from afar, I knew I'd never lose myself again. That was the quiet miracle of it all. I had stopped asking to be seen, and in doing so, I finally was. If this story stirred something in you, if you've ever had to walk away to protect your peace or rebuild a life someone else tried to write for you, share it, like it, comment below. You never know who might need the courage to choose themselves today.